A bankrupt mechanic braves a blizzard to rescue two little girls from an overturned car, unaware that they are the daughters of a powerful billionaire. The creak of the old screwdriver echoed through the empty garage, a sound as familiar as Jack Anderson's own heartbeat. His calloused hands, silent witnesses to 2 decades of fixing this small town's automotive dreams, trembled slightly as he shut the last drawer of his toolbox. Clank! The metallic clamor reverberated, carrying the weight of 1,000 repairs, 1,000 satisfied customer smiles, and now 1,000 broken dreams. Jack, his 40 years etched into every premature crease on his face, looked around the garage. The walls, once vibrant with posters of classic cars and photos of beaming customers, now seemed faded, as if life itself had been drained from that space, along with his hopes. A howling wind slipped through a crack in the window, bringing the first snowflake with it. The storm was coming. Final call for all drivers. The biggest blizzard in the last 30 years is on its way. I repeat, the biggest blizzard in 3 decades. Stay home, folks. The radio announcer's shrill voice cut through the garage's sepulchral silence. Jack frowned, his eyes instinctively darting to the crooked calendar on the wall. The dates scrawled in red seemed to shout at him. Late payment. Final notice. Eviction imminent. With a heavy sigh, Jack grabbed his worn coat from the rack. The fabric, patched so many times it was hard to tell the original color, draped over his shoulders like an old friend. Reaching into the pocket, his fingers brushed against a few crumpled bills. He pulled them out, counting slowly. 1, 2, 3, $43. Everything he had left. It'll have to be enough, he muttered to himself, his voice rough from days without conversation. As he closed the shop door, the squeak of the hinges sounded like a lament. Jack hesitated, his hand hovering over the lock. For a moment, he glimpsed a younger version of himself, brimming with hope and ambition, opening that same door for the first time. The contrast with the man he was now, weighed down by unspeakable losses, was too painful to bear. Click! The lock sealed more than just the door. It sealed a chapter of his life. Jack walked over to his 1995 Ford pickup, a roaming testament to his skill as a mechanic. The truck, which should have been scrapped years ago, still purred like a satisfied cat thanks to his expert hands. Once he settled into the driver's seat, his eyes were immediately drawn to the photo taped to the dashboard. Sarah, with her radiant smile, looked back at him. Time had faded the image, but the memory of her laughter, the warmth of her touch, the light in her eyes remained vivid and painful. "Oh, Sarah," Jack whispered, tracing the outline of her face in the photograph with his fingers. "What I wouldn't give to hear your voice one more time." A flashback struck him like a punch to the gut. Sarah, pale and weak, lying in a hospital bed, her once melodious voice now barely a whisper. "Jack, honey, promise me you won't give up, no matter what happens." Of course he had promised. How could he deny her anything? But things had gotten so hard since then. The closure of Central Hospital, where Sarah had her treatment, was the beginning of the end. The transfer to a hospital in another town, the astronomical costs, the endless commutes, and then, 6 months later, the inevitable. Jack shook his head, trying to shove the painful memories aside. He had a mission now, to get supplies before the storm isolated them completely. The pickup protested as he turned the key, coughing and sputtering before finally roaring to life. Jack patted the dashboard affectionately. "Come on, girl. One more adventure." The streets of the small town of Millbrook were almost deserted. A few stragglers dashed from store to store, arms loaded with provisions. The sky, a threatening grey, seemed to press down on the land, as though aiming to crush the town under its weight. Jack navigated carefully through increasingly slippery roads. Each turn brought a new memory. There was the park where he and Sarah used to picnic on Sundays. Further ahead, the flower shop where he bought daisies for her every Friday. And there, looming vacant and foreboding, stood the abandoned building that used to be Central Hospital. His heart clenched as he passed the hospital. The empty windows seemed to glare at him accusingly, as if asking, "Why didn't you do more? Why didn't you fight harder?" Jack looked away, focusing on the road ahead. He couldn't change the past, but maybe, just maybe, He could still do something about the future. The grocery store was chaos. People were shoving overloaded carts, arguing over cans of beans and toilet paper packs. Jack drifted through the aisles like a ghost, picking up only the essentials: a few cans of soup, a loaf of bread, candles. While standing in the checkout line, his gaze fell on a small box of chocolates. Sarah loved chocolates. On impulse, he grabbed it, adding it to his modest haul. "That'll be $41.75, sir," said the young cashier, her face a mask of exhaustion. Jack handed over the crumpled bills, receiving a few coins in return. He stared at them in his palm. $1.25. All that stood between him and total bankruptcy. Exiting the store, the biting wind hit him like a slap. Snow now fell heavily, turning the world into a white blur. Jack pulled his coat tighter, rushing to his pickup. Seated once again in the relative shelter of his old truck, Jack let out a trembling sigh. The weight of it all, the closed garage, unpaid bills, crushing loneliness, threatened to choke him. His eyes returned to Sarah's photo. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to challenge him to keep going, not to give up. "I promised, didn't I?" Jack murmured, his voice tight. "I promised I wouldn't quit." With renewed resolve, he started the engine. The pickup growled in response, as though sharing his determination. As he maneuvered through streets now nearly invisible under the snow, Jack made a silent vow, not just to Sarah but to himself. He would survive this storm, just like he'd survived all the other storms life had thrown at him. And maybe, just maybe, when the snow melted, he would find a new beginning. The radio crackled again, the announcer's voice almost drowned out by the howling wind. Conditions worsening by the minute. Stay home, people of Millbrook. This could be the storm of the century. Jack gripped the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The blizzard might be the worst in 30 years, but he had already faced his own internal storms. With $1.25 in his pocket, a truck more rust than metal, and the memory of a promise made to Sarah, Jack Anderson drove off into the unknown. The storm might only just be beginning, but for Jack, it was just another chapter in a survival story he was determined to keep writing. The gentle purr of the Range Rover's engine was almost inaudible inside the luxuriously insulated cabin. Emma Williams, her keen 5-year-old blue eyes, watched the swirling snowflakes through the tinted glass, mesmerized by the hypnotic patterns they made against the grey, turbulent sky. "Emmy, tell me the magic bunny story again." Lily's high-pitched voice, she had just turned 3, cut through the silence, her chubby little hands tugging at the sleeve of her older sister's cashmere coat. Emma smiled, a smile carrying a maturity beyond her years. "Okay, Lils. But you have to promise to stay quiet while Susan drives, and okay?" In the front seat, Susan Alvarez, 28, the girl's nanny for almost 2 years, glanced gratefully in the rearview mirror. Her hands clutched the leather steering wheel, knuckles white with tension as she navigated the increasingly treacherous road. "Once upon a time," Emma began, her voice mimicking the melodious tones she remembered from her mother, "there was a little white bunny who lived in the enchanted forest." While Emma wove the familiar tale, Susan fought against the growing anxiety in her chest. The blizzard, which had begun as a light snowfall, had turned into an impenetrable white curtain. The state-of-the-art GPS on the dashboard blinked uselessly, unable to find a signal. With a trembling hand, Susan picked up her phone for the 10th time in the last 20 minutes. No signal. She cursed softly in Spanish, immediately regretting it and hoping the girls hadn't heard. "Mr. Williams, please pick up," she whispered, dialing the girl's father once more. Michael Williams, a tech mogul billionaire and reluctant single dad, was in a business meeting on the other side of the world. Susan knew he rarely took calls during these meetings, but this was an emergency. They should have arrived at the country house hours ago, but the storm delayed everything. In the back seat, oblivious to the mounting danger, Emma continued her story. And then the magic bunny jumped so high that his fluffy ears brushed the clouds. "And do you know what happened?" Lily shook her head, eyes wide with anticipation, clutching her teddy bear tight. "The clouds were made of cotton candy," Emma exclaimed, tickling her sister's belly and prompting a burst of giggles. Despite the situation, Susan couldn't help a small smile. The Williams sisters were true rays of sunshine, brightening even the darkest days with their innocence and joy. Since Catherine Williams's death 2 years ago, they'd become even closer, with Emma instinctively taking on the role of protector for her younger sister. A sudden jolt made Susan's smile vanish. The Range Rover slid dangerously, and she fought to maintain control. The girls screamed more from excitement than fear, thinking it was part of some game. "It's okay, niñas," Susan assured them, her Spanish accent more pronounced under stress. "Just a small bump." But it wasn't okay. Visibility was almost zero, and traffic ahead was completely stalled. Impatient horns blared through the snowfall, adding to the stressful cacophony. That was when Susan made the decision that changed everything. "Girls, we're going on a little adventure," she announced, forcing a cheery tone into her voice. "We're taking a secret shortcut." Emma frowned, her sharp intuition picking up on the nanny's tension. "But Susan, Daddy always says not to leave the main route." Susan swallowed hard. Emma was right, of course. Michael Williams was a man of strict habits and rules. But what did he expect her to do? Remain stuck on the road for hours, possibly overnight during a record-breaking blizzard? "Sometimes, Emmy, we have to be brave and try new things," Susan explained, carefully maneuvering the SUV onto an exit almost hidden by snow. "It's like in the Magic Bunny story. He had to jump really high to discover the cotton candy clouds, right?" Emma nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but willing to trust the adult in charge. The secondary road was even more perilous. Snow-laden trees bent menacingly over the path, their shadows creating ghostly shapes in the blinding whiteness. Susan reduced her speed, her eyes straining to distinguish road from ditch. In the back seat, Emma resumed telling stories to Lily, this time inventing new adventures for the Magic Bunny. Her gentle voice provided a surreal counterpoint to the winds howling outside, and the bunny found a secret cave made entirely of sparkling crystals. Once again, Susan tried her phone. Nothing. Panic began creeping into her chest. What if she had made a terrible mistake? What if... A sudden movement in the corner of her eye made her jerk the wheel. A deer, startled by the SUV's silent approach, leapt into the road. Susan slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The world spun in slow motion, the girl's screams, the deafening crash, the sensation of falling, then silence. When Susan regained consciousness, the first thing she noticed was the biting cold. The second was the soft crying coming from the back seat. "Emma, Lily," she called, her voice hoarse. "Susan?" Emma's shaky voice replied, "Lily's crying. I think she's hurt." Susan tried to move, but a sharp pain paralyzed her. Something warm and sticky trickled down her face. Blood, she realized with mounting horror. "Emma, sweetie," Susan said, struggling to keep her voice calm. "Can you see outside? Where are we?" A pause, the sound of movement. "It's all white, Susan," Emma replied, fear evident. We're upside down." Susan's heart sank. They had rolled over, most likely sliding into a ditch. The snow kept falling mercilessly, soon to bury the vehicle completely. "Emma, listen carefully," Susan instructed, feeling consciousness slip away again. "You need to be very brave now. Take care of Lily. Someone will find us." Her last words were swallowed by the darkness closing in on her. In the back seat, Emma clung to Lily, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Don't cry, Lils," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Remember what Mommy always said. Guardian angels are always watching over us. Someone will come, I promise." And so, the two little Williams sisters, lost in the vast whiteness, waited. For a miracle. For a guardian angel. For someone to save them from the raging storm around them. The wind howled like a ravenous beast, lashing Jack's pickup with relentless gusts of snow and ice. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the storm, barely managing to clear a slit of visibility before another wave of white obscured it again. Jack gripped the steering wheel so tight his fingers hurt, his eyes squinting to see any sign of the road ahead. The paper bag on the passenger seat, containing his meager groceries, a few cans of soup, a loaf of bread, and the chocolates he'd bought on a whim, seemed to mock him. Would he even live long enough to open one of those cans? Then it happened. A deafening boom cut through the storm's roar, so close and sudden that Jack instinctively slammed on the brakes. The pickup skidded wildly, spinning nearly 180 degrees before coming to a stop, the engine sputtering and dying. For a moment, Jack sat frozen, heart hammering against his ribs. What the hell was that? Lightning. An explosion. Shaking off the stupor, he tried starting the engine again. Nothing. "Come on, girl," he muttered, twisting the key repeatedly. "Don't fail me now." But the old Ford remained stubbornly silent. Cursing under his breath, Jack grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and, taking a deep breath, opened the truck door. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet, snow stinging his eyes and mouth. Blinking furiously, he raised the flashlight, its beam slicing through the white curtain. That was when he saw it, tracks in the snow. They weren't footprints, but rather deep grooves, as if something large and heavy had slid. Jack's stomach twisted. "Oh, no," he whispered. Ignoring the biting cold, he started following the tracks. Each step was a battle against the wind and deep snow. His former paramedic instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Jack reached the edge of a steep embankment. Pointing the flashlight downward, his heart nearly stopped. Below, partially buried in the snow, lay an overturned Range Rover. "Damn," Jack cursed, adrenaline surging through his veins. Without a second thought, he began descending, sliding, and slipping down the treacherous slope. Reaching the vehicle, Jack frantically brushed snow from the driver's window. What he saw made him gasp. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, hung motionless from her seatbelt, blood freezing on her pale face. "Hey, can you hear me?" Jack shouted, banging on the glass. No response. That was when he heard it, a faint crying from the back seat. Renewed urgency seized Jack as he scrambled to the rear door. The metal was twisted, stuck. Cursing, he raced back up the slope to his pickup, nearly falling multiple times on the way. Returning with his toolbox, Jack worked furiously to pry the door open. His fingers, numb from cold, could barely grip the tools, but years of mechanical experience guided his movements. Finally, with a protesting screech of metal, the door gave way. The interior was a wreck of shattered glass, splintered plastic, and toys. Jack's heart sank when he saw 2 child safety seats. "Hello," he called softly. "Can anyone hear me?" A sudden movement startled him. From behind one of the seats, a pair of wide blue eyes stared back at him. "Who are you?" a small voice asked, trembling but defiant. Jack let out a sigh of relief. "My name's Jack. I'm here to help. Are you hurt?" Slowly, a girl of about 5 emerged from the shadows. Her face was scratched, and a bruise was forming on her forehead, but she seemed otherwise uninjured. "I'm okay," she said. Then her expression shifted to worry. "But Lily, she won't stop crying." That was when Jack noticed the second child, a smaller girl, barely 3, huddled and sobbing softly. "It's all right," Jack said, trying to make his voice as reassuring as possible. "I'm going to get you both out of here. What's your name?" "Emma," the older girl replied. "And she's my sister, Lily." Jack methodically checked the girls for serious injuries. Miraculously, apart from cuts and bruises, they seemed okay. The real threat now was hypothermia. "Emma, I need you to be very brave," Jack said, meeting her eyes. "I'm going to carry you and Lily out, but it'll be a bit scary. Can you be strong for Lily?" Emma nodded solemnly, her gaze far older than her 5 years. With utmost care, Jack lifted Lily first, wrapping her in his own coat. The little one clung to him, trembling violently. "Emma, can you grab your backpack?" Jack asked. "We'll need dry clothes." While Emma rummaged through the wreckage, Jack made one last desperate check on the driver. No pulse. Heavy-hearted, he turned back to the children. Climbing back up the embankment with 2 small children was a nightmare. The wind seemed determined to knock them down, and the snow made each step a struggle. Jack carried Lily in one arm, using the other to brace himself and help Emma. Several times he slipped, his heart lurching each time as he fought to keep his balance. Emma, showing surprising courage, clung firmly to his leg, bravely carrying Lily's backpack. "Almost there," Jack panted when he finally saw the blurred outline of his pickup through the snow. "You're doing great, girls." At last, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the road. Jack gently placed Lily in the passenger seat, helping Emma climb up beside her. Once inside the cab, Jack cranked up the heater, rubbing the girl's hands to restore circulation. "Are you an angel?" Lily suddenly asked, her small voice quivering. Jack felt a lump in his throat. "No, sweetheart, just someone trying to help." Looking at the two frightened but alive girls, Jack felt a fierce determination rise within him. He had found them for a reason. Now it was his responsibility to keep them safe. Turning the key, Jack offered a silent prayer. To his relief and surprise, the engine coughed and then roared to life. "All right, girls," he said, guiding the pickup forward. "Let's find a safe place to wait out this storm." As they crawled slowly through the blizzard, Jack couldn't help thinking that maybe, just maybe, he'd discovered a new purpose that night, a chance for redemption, wrapped in the form of two small survivors. The old Ford groaned and creaked, struggling against the relentless wind and quickly accumulating snow. Jack gripped the wheel tightly, squinting in a desperate attempt to see something beyond the white curtain in front of him. On the passenger seat, Emma clung to Lily, both girls shivering despite the heater running at full blast. "It'll be okay, Lils," Emma whispered, her voice nearly lost in the wind's howl. "Mr. Jack is going to take care of us." Jack swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He could barely take care of himself lately, and now he had two precious lives depending on him. That was when he saw it, a dark, looming shape emerging from the blinding whiteness. "Thank God," Jack muttered, carefully steering toward the structure. As they drew closer, the outline of a large, abandoned warehouse became visible. It looked like an old factory or storage facility, its rusted metal walls defying the storm for decades. Jack stopped the pickup as close to the entrance as possible. "Stay here," he instructed the girls, grabbing his flashlight. "I'll check if it's safe." The wind nearly toppled him when he exited. Battling the storm, Jack reached the warehouse door. To his relief, it opened with a protesting squeak. Inside, it was vast and dark, the flashlight's beam revealing long-abandoned machinery and dusty piles of boxes. But it was dry and, most importantly, offered protection from the biting wind. Satisfied it was safe enough, Jack returned to the pickup. "Come on, girls," he said, opening the door. "We found our shelter." With Lily in his arms and Emma clinging to his leg, Jack guided them into the warehouse. The sudden silence after the constant wind was almost deafening. "It's dark," Lily whimpered, burying her face in Jack's neck. "Don't worry, princess," Jack replied gently. "We'll make this place nice and cozy in no time." Setting Lily down carefully, Jack started to rummage around the warehouse. His years as a mechanic had taught him how to improvise, and those skills would now be tested to their limits. "Emma, can you hold the flashlight for me?" he asked, handing the device to the older girl. Emma nodded solemnly, gripping the flashlight tightly while Jack worked. He found an old oil drum, which he quickly turned into an improvised fire pit. Pieces of scrap wood and cardboard served as fuel. "Now the trick is lighting it," Jack muttered, patting his pockets for a lighter. "I have matches," Emma suddenly exclaimed, running over to the backpack they'd salvaged from the wreck. "Mom always said to keep matches in the emergency pack." Jack smiled, impressed. "Your mom was a very smart woman." With Emma's matches, Jack soon had a crackling fire in the drum. The heat began to spread, banishing some of the piercing cold. Next step, create a protected space. Jack found a few old tarps and ropes, which he used to build a makeshift tent around the fire pit. "Wow," Lily whispered, eyes wide as she watched the dancing flames. "It's like camping." "It sure is, Lils," Emma agreed, hugging her sister close. "We're on a big adventure." Jack felt a twinge of heartache seeing how the sisters interacted. Emma, just 5 years old, was showing a maturity far beyond her age. With their improvised shelter complete, Jack turned his attention to the supplies. The grocery bag looked tragically inadequate now, but it would have to do. "Who's hungry?" he asked, forcing a cheerful tone. "Me!" Lily shouted, raising her hand. Jack opened a can of soup, pouring it into a metal container he found in the warehouse. Placing it near the fire to heat, he handed out some crackers. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it'll keep us warm." It's perfect, Mr. Jack, Emma said politely, sharing her portion with Lily. Thank you for taking care of us. Jack felt a lump in his throat. You girls are incredibly brave, he said softly. You're doing so well. As they ate the warmed soup and crackers, Jack realized the girls needed a distraction. The trauma of the crash, the cold, the fear. It could easily become overwhelming. How about a story? He suggested. Lily's eyes lit up. Yes, please. Emma always tells the best stories. Jack smiled at Emma. Well, then I guess we should let the expert take over, right? But Emma hesitated, suddenly shy. Actually, could you tell a story, Mr. Jack? I'm kind of tired of being the storyteller. Jack understood the unspoken plea. Emma needed to be just a child for a moment, not the caregiver. Of course, he replied gently. Let me think. Have you heard the story of the mechanic who fixed the moon? The girls shook their heads, eyes wide with curiosity, and so, as the storm raged outside, Jack spun a fantastical tale about an ordinary mechanic called upon for an extraordinary mission. He spoke of magical screwdrivers and engine oil that sparkled like stars, of lunar gears and craters that were actually giant loose bolts. The girls listened, captivated, their fears momentarily forgotten. Emma visibly relaxed, allowing herself to be a 5-year-old again. By the time the story ended, Lily was drifting off, curled against her sister. Emma struggled to keep her eyes open. Get some sleep, Jack said softly. I'll keep watch. Emma nodded sleepily. Thank you, Mr. Jack, she murmured. You're a great storyteller and a great guardian angel. As the girls slept, Jack fed the fire, his thoughts a jumble of worry and resolve. Outside, the storm still raged mercilessly. But here, in this small improvised haven, there was warmth, safety, and surprisingly a sense of purpose Jack hadn't felt in a long time. Gazing at the two small sleeping figures, Jack made a silent promise. He would protect them, no matter the cost. Somehow they would survive this storm together. The darkness of the warehouse was interrupted only by the soft glow of the embers in the makeshift fire pit. Jack, leaning against a rusted wall, fought against sleep. His eyes kept drooping, only to snap open seconds later. A sharp cry finally jolted him out of his half-conscious state. "Mommy! Mommy!" Lily thrashed in her sleep, tears rolling down her chubby cheeks. Emma was instantly alert, pulling her younger sister close. "Shh, Lils, it's okay," Emma whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm here." Jack watched with a tightness in his chest as Emma began singing softly. It was a simple lullaby, one he vaguely recognized. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky." Emma's voice, though young and slightly off-key, was filled with love and concern. Gradually, Lily's sobs subsided, and she drifted back into a calmer sleep. "That was Mommy's favorite song," Emma said quietly, noticing Jack's gaze. "She always sang it when we had nightmares." Jack moved closer, careful not to disturb Lily. "You take such good care of your sister, Emma," he said gently. "It must be hard sometimes." Emma shrugged, but Jack could see the burden weighing on her small shoulders. "Someone has to do it," she replied, sounding far older than 5. "Dad, he's always busy." Jack felt a surge of anger toward the girl's absent father. How could someone neglect children this precious? He kept his voice neutral. "Want to talk about it?" Emma hesitated, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. "Dad works a lot. He says it's to give us a good life, but—" She paused, biting her lip. "Sometimes I think he just doesn't want to be home. Everything reminds him of Mommy." Jack nodded empathetically. He knew that pain well, the urge to run from memories. "You know, Emma, sometimes adults don't handle sadness as well as children do." "Did you lose someone too, Mr. Jack?" she asked, her piercing blue eyes locked on his. Jack swallowed hard, caught off guard by the child's insight. "Yes," he admitted. "My wife, Sarah, she passed away a few years ago." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly, placing her small hand on Jack's. The simple gesture nearly broke him. "It's all right," he managed. You know, when I was a kid, my dad taught me that telling funny stories can help when we're sad. Want to hear one? Emma nodded eagerly, and even Lily, who had quietly awakened, looked on with curiosity. Jack smiled and began, "When I was about your age, Emma, I decided I wanted to be a superhero." He told them how he'd tied a red towel around his neck as a cape and set out to save the world. His first mission, rescuing the neighbor's cat from a tree. Unfortunately, little Jack ended up stuck in the tree alongside the cat, and the fire department had to rescue both. The girls laughed, their giggles echoing through the empty warehouse. It was the first time Jack had heard them laugh since the accident, and the sound warmed his heart more than any fire could. Encouraged, Jack shared more childhood escapades. The time he tried making pancakes and ended up with flour on the ceiling, or when he and his friends built a spaceship out of cardboard boxes and were disappointed they couldn't actually fly to the moon. Each story brought more laughter, more smiles. Emma visibly relaxed, allowing herself to be a normal 5-year-old instead of the little adult circumstances had forced her to be. "Mr. Jack," Lily asked between giggles, "do you still want to be a superhero?" Jack pretended to ponder. "Well, I guess in a way I still am. After all, I rescued 2 princesses from an ice castle, didn't I?" The girls burst into laughter again, and Jack felt something thaw inside him. How long had it been since he'd laughed like this? How long since he'd felt needed? As the night wore on, the conversation grew calmer. Emma spoke about her school, about how she sometimes felt lonely even when surrounded by other kids. Lily, quieter, occasionally added details to Emma's stories, her eyes shining with adoration for her big sister. Jack listened intently, offering words of comfort and encouragement. He shared more about his own life, his work as a mechanic, the challenges he faced, and the dreams he still harbored. By the time the first rays of sun crept through the cracks in the warehouse walls, Jack realized they had spent the entire night talking. The girls had finally drifted to sleep, Emma protectively holding Lily close. Watching the 2 small figures, Jack felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Somehow, in one of the worst storms he had ever faced, both literally and figuratively, he had found a connection. These girls, with their resilience and innocence, had touched a part of him he thought long dead. For a moment, Jack allowed himself to imagine a different future. One where he wasn't alone, where he had a purpose beyond merely surviving day to day. It was a terrifying and exhilarating thought. Shaking his head, Jack rose quietly to tend the fire. The storm still raged outside, and many challenges lay ahead. But for the first time in years, Jack felt he might be able to face whatever came next. With a final affectionate glance at Emma and Lily, Jack made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would protect them. Somehow they would survive this storm together. And maybe, in doing so, they would all find the family they so desperately needed. Michael Williams, CEO of Williams Tech, was in the middle of a critical presentation when his smartphone vibrated insistently. Normally, he would ignore it. After all, billions were on the line in this meeting. But something made him look. The name flashing on the screen froze his blood. "Home emergency." "Gentlemen, I need a moment," he said, his voice betraying no emotion as he rose from the polished mahogany conference table. In the hallway, away from curious eyes of executives and investors, Michael answered the call. The frantic voice of his housekeeper, Mrs. Patel, hit him like a punch to the gut. "Mr. Williams, the girls, the SUV, the blizzard." Michael's world fell apart in seconds. His daughters, Emma and Lily, were missing in the worst storm in 30 years. Returning to the conference room, Michael barely remembered what he said. Something about a family emergency. The words billions and deal lost all meaning. Within minutes, he was on his private jet racing back home, the storm making the plane rock violently. During the turbulent flight, flashbacks tormented him. Emma, 3 years old, running into his arms when he arrived home from work. Lily, a newborn, her tiny fingers gripping his thumb with surprising strength. And Catherine, his wife, his safe harbor, smiling radiantly as she watched the scene. Then the illness, the devastating diagnosis, months of treatment that felt like years. And finally, the deafening silence after Catherine's passing. Michael squeezed his eyes shut as though he could block the memories, but they came relentlessly. Emma, now 4, asking when Mommy would be back. Lily, crying inconsolably, refusing to sleep without Catherine's lullaby. And he, running away, drowning himself in work, expanding the company, amassing more wealth, as if money could fill the void Catherine left behind. When the plane finally landed, Michael was greeted by a crisis team already mobilized. Preliminary reports, area maps, weather forecasts, everything was a blur. "Sir," an aide approached hesitantly. "The rescue teams are ready, but what?" Michael growled, his patience gone. "The blizzard, sir. It's simply impossible to go out right now. Visibility is 0 and the roads are completely blocked." Michael felt a wave of fury rising inside him. It couldn't be true. He was Michael Williams. He had built an empire from scratch. He had revolutionized the tech industry. He had billions at his disposal. "I don't care what's impossible," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Find my daughters. Use helicopters, drones, whatever it takes. Pay double, triple if needed. But find them." The next few hours were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Michael turned his penthouse into an impromptu command center. Giant screens displayed area maps, real-time weather updates, and security camera feeds of the roads, now useless, showing only white static. But as the hours passed, the harsh reality set in. No helicopter could fly in those conditions. Drones were knocked out of the sky by furious winds within minutes. Ground teams got stuck after only a few miles. For the first time in his adult life, Michael Williams felt utterly powerless. Standing before his penthouse's panoramic windows, watching the storm transform the city into a white desert, Michael felt the weight of his choices crushing him. How many times had he cancelled family dinners for business meetings? How many of Emma's school recitals had he missed? How often had he outsourced Lily's care to nannies and housekeepers? A sob escaped his throat, shocking him. He couldn't recall the last time he cried, perhaps at Catherine's funeral. "Mr. Williams?" His assistant's hesitant voice pulled him back to reality. "Is there anything I can do?" Michael turned, his eyes red and weary. For a moment he almost yelled at her, unleashing his frustration, but then he saw genuine concern and fear on her face. "Rachel, right?" he asked softly. She nodded. Surprised, he remembered her name. "Rachel, do you have children?" "Yes, sir. 2 girls." Michael felt like he'd been punched again. "2 girls," he repeated. How do you balance it all? Work, family?" Rachel seemed briefly disconcerted by her usually distant boss's personal question. "It's not always easy, sir," she admitted. "But at the end of the day, they are my priority, always." Michael nodded slowly, the words hitting him like lightning. Priority. What had been his priority these past years? Turning back to the window, Michael pressed his forehead against the cold glass. "Emma," he whispered. "Lily, Daddy's so sorry. So sorry." For a moment, he imagined he could see through the blizzard, pinpointing his missing daughters by sheer force of will. But the storm raged on, indifferent to his power or wealth. "Rachel," he said finally, voice raw, "cancel all my engagements for the next few weeks, and bring me every file we have on the old Central Hospital, the one we closed 2 years ago." Rachel looked puzzled but nodded. "Yes, sir." "Anything else?" Michael stared once more at the furious storm. "Yes. Pray that my girls are safe, and that I'll have a chance to fix my mistakes." As Rachel quietly left, Michael Williams, the tech titan, the ruthless billionaire, fell to his knees. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for profits or acquisitions, but for something infinitely more precious, for a second chance with his daughters, for redemption. Outside, the blizzard kept howling, a cruel reminder that some forces lie beyond even the most powerful man's control. And somewhere, lost in the vast whiteness, 2 little girls were waiting for a rescue that seemed impossible. Morning of the second day in the abandoned warehouse brought a cruel clarity. The storm still raged outside, its howling wind a constant reminder of the peril they were in. Jack awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. "Mr. Jack," Emma's gentle voice brought him back to reality. "Lily's hungry." Jack rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off exhaustion. "Of course, sweetie. Let's see what we can do." With a sigh, he turned to the grim task of rationing their sparse supplies. The few cans of soup and the package of crackers looked tragically inadequate now. Jack carefully divided a can of soup into 2 improvised containers, saving the rest for later. "Here you go, girls," he said, forcing a smile as he handed them their portions. "It's not much, but it'll keep us warm." Emma accepted her share with a polite "thank you," immediately offering half to Lily. Jack watched, impressed, as the 5-year-old helped her younger sister eat, gently wiping away any spilled soup. "You're an excellent big sister, Emma," Jack commented, feeling a mix of admiration and sorrow at the maturity forced upon the girl. Emma shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Someone has to look after Lily, and now I guess I have to look after you too, Mr. Jack." Jack felt a lump in his throat. How could a child so young be so selfless? While the girls ate, Jack decided to examine more closely the items salvaged from the crash. The emergency backpack Emma had mentioned the night before contained a few extra clothes, a half-full water bottle, and, surprisingly, a small first aid kit. "Your mum thought of everything, huh?" Jack remarked, holding up the first aid kit. A flicker of sadness crossed Emma's face. "Mom always said we had to be ready for anything." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the loss these girls carried. Continuing his search, he found a crumpled plastic folder, probably belonging to the nanny. Curious, he opened it. His eyes widened as he read the letterhead, "Property of Michael Williams, confidential." The name hit Jack like a punch in the gut. Michael Williams, the billionaire tech tycoon, the man who had bought and closed Central Hospital 2 years earlier, leaving hundreds unemployed, and patients like Sarah without options. Jack felt a surge of anger rising in his chest. Memories of Sarah's final months, her desperate battle for alternative treatment, the swift and merciless decline, flooded back. "Mr. Jack," Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. "Are you okay?" Jack realized he was gripping the document so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He forced a smile, trying to mask his agitation. "Yes, Emma. Just thinking." But Emma was too perceptive for her own good. She stepped closer, her blue eyes full of concern. "You look sad. Is it because of my dad?" Jack swallowed hard. How could he explain to a child that her father had indirectly contributed to his wife's death? That part of him wanted to scream with rage, while another part knew these innocent girls bore no blame for their father's actions. "Emma," Jack began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes the decisions adults make have consequences they never intended. Your dad, well, he made some choices that affected a lot of people." Emma nodded solemnly. "Daddy always says tough decisions are part of business, but—" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Sometimes I think he forgets that decisions also affect people." The wisdom in her words caught Jack by surprise. He felt his anger lessen, replaced by a complex swirl of emotions. "You're very smart, Emma," Jack said softly. "And you're right. Sometimes people forget about the impact of what they do." Lily, who had been quietly playing with bits of paper, chose that moment to come over. She looked at Jack with large brown eyes, then at Emma, clearly sensing the tension. "Mr. Jack sad?" she asked innocently. Before Jack could reply, Emma acted. She went to her backpack and pulled out a small, well-loved brown teddy bear. "Here, Mr. Jack," Emma said, holding out the bear. "This is Mr. Snuggles. He always makes me feel better when I'm sad. You can have him for a while." Jack felt tears burn his eyes. The simple, pure gesture, offering her most precious belonging to comfort him, moved him deeply. How could he hold on to any resentment when faced with such kindness? "Thank you, Emma," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot to me." Not wanting to be left out, Lily approached and wrapped her arms around Jack's leg in a clumsy hug. "Don't be sad, Mr. Jack. We like you." In that moment, looking at the 2 little girls fate had placed in his care, Jack felt something shift inside him. The anger and bitterness he'd carried for so long began to melt, replaced by a fierce determination to protect these children no matter what. "I like you both very much too," Jack said, pulling them into a hug. "And I promise I'll take care of you, whatever happens." Throughout the day, Jack watched Emma and Lily play, share stories, and laugh despite their difficult circumstances. Their resilience was inspiring. Jack knew they still faced many challenges: the meager supplies, the unrelenting cold, and an uncertain future. But looking at the girls, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. With Mr. Snuggles clutched against his chest, Jack made a silent vow. He would get them home safely, whatever it took, and perhaps, in the process, he might find his own path to healing and forgiveness. The third day in the warehouse dawned cold and bleak. Jack woke up with a sharp pain in his back, the result of sleeping on the hard floor. Next to him, Emma and Lily still slept, curled against each other like kittens seeking warmth. While searching for more wood for the fire, Jack spotted it: an old shortwave radio, nearly hidden under a dusty pile of boxes. "Please," he murmured, picking up the device carefully as though it were made of glass. "Please let this work." The next few hours were a race against time and obsolete technology. Jack disassembled the radio, cleaning away decades of dust and corrosion. His hands, used to fixing engines, now worked delicately with tiny wires and fragile circuits. Emma woke up in the middle of this process, her sleepy eyes widening at Jack's intense concentration. "Mr. Jack," she called softly. "What's that?" Jack looked up, a tired smile on his face. "This, Emma, might be our salvation. It's a radio. If we can fix it, we can call for help." Emma's eyes sparkled with renewed hope. "Can I help?" "Of course you can," Jack replied. "I actually need an assistant, someone smart and brave. Do you know anyone like that?" Emma giggled, her laughter echoing in the empty space. "Me! I can be your assistant." And so, while Lily continued sleeping, Emma became Jack's official helper. She held an improvised lantern, made from an empty can and a piece of candle, handed him tools, and most importantly, kept Jack's spirits high with her curious questions and keen observations. "Mr. Jack," Emma asked after a while, "how did you learn to fix things?" Jack smiled, remembering simpler times. "My dad taught me. He said understanding how things work is the first step to fixing what's broken. Not just machines, but everything in life." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like broken hearts?" Jack paused, surprised by the depth of her question. "Yes, Emma. Exactly like broken hearts." The hours ticked by, marked only by the constant roar of the wind outside and Jack's occasional muttered curses of frustration. Lily eventually woke and joined them, curious about the project. "What are you doing?" she asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "We're fixing a magic radio," Emma explained solemnly. "It'll help us talk to the guardian angels out there." Jack couldn't help smiling at Emma's explanation. In a way, she wasn't wrong. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack made the last connection. Heart pounding, he switched the device on. Static. Only static. The disappointment was palpable. Jack felt a knot form in his stomach. He had failed. He had raised the girls' hopes for nothing. But then, "Rescue team, anyone on this frequency," the voice, though intermittent and nearly drowned in static, was like music to Jack's ears. "Here!" Jack shouted into the radio. "This is Jack Anderson. I'm with 2 children. We need help." The next few minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Jack tried to describe their location as best he could, aware that every word might be the difference between rescue and disaster. "Understood, Mr. Anderson," the voice finally responded. "Keep this channel open. We're triangulating your position. Help is on the way." When Jack finally set the radio down, his hands were shaking. He looked at Emma and Lily, who were watching him with a mixture of hope and fear. They're going to find us?" Emma asked tentatively. Jack nodded, pulling both girls into a tight embrace. "Yes, sweetie, they're going to find us." The initial relief, however, soon gave way to a new wave of anxiety. The blizzard still raged outside, a constant reminder of what any rescue team would be facing. To keep the girls, and himself, distracted from the agonizing wait, Jack suggested a guessing game. "I'm thinking of something Blue, he began. The sky, Lily shouted immediately. Jack smiled. Good try, Lils, but I can't exactly see the sky right now, can I? Emma furrowed her brow thoughtfully. Oh, I know. It's Lily's scarf. Exactly, Jack cheered. Your turn, Emma. The game continued, with the girls growing increasingly creative in their guesses. But as the hours dragged on, Jack noticed Emma becoming quieter, her eyes frequently darting to the silent radio. Is everything okay, Emma? He asked softly. Emma bit her lip. Mr. Jack, what if they can't find us? The question hung in the air, heavy and frightening. Jack knew he had to be honest but also reassuring. Emma, he began gently, remember when we were fixing the radio? It seemed impossible at first, but we didn't give up. Life works like that. Sometimes it feels hard, but we have to keep trying. Emma nodded slowly. Like being a guardian angel. Jack smiled, touched by the analogy. Exactly. And you know what? You've been an incredible guardian angel for me and Lily. Your courage and your help mean a lot. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she offered a brave smile. Can I keep helping you, Mr. Jack? There's no one else I'd rather have by my side, Jack replied sincerely. As night fell, Jack stoked the fire and handed out the last of their food. The cold and hunger were constant companions now, but the hope kindled by the radio kept them going. Emma, true to her word, stayed by Jack's side, helping monitor the radio and care for Lily. Her resilience and maturity continued to amaze and inspire him. Lying near the fire, exhausted yet determined, the three of them waited. The radio crackled occasionally with updates from the rescue team, each message a reminder they were not forgotten. Jack watched the girls, now asleep, and made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would protect them. Together, they would survive this storm. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside that warehouse, buoyed by an old radio and a little girl's courage, the flame of hope burned brighter than ever. The improvised command center in Michael Williams's penthouse pulsed with frenetic energy. Giant screens covered the walls, displaying weather maps, camera feeds, and real-time search data. The air was thick with tension and the strong scent of coffee. Michael, sporting deep circles under his eyes and an unshaven face, stood at the center of the storm. His gaze darted from screen to screen, absorbing information, making snap decisions, issuing orders in rapid-fire succession. "What's the status of the helicopters?" he asked, his voice rough from exhaustion. A young technician answered nervously, "Still grounded, sir. Winds at 75 miles per hour, trying to fly is suicide." Michael muttered a curse under his breath. Every passing minute was a minute his daughters remained in danger. He turned to another team member. "What about the ground crews?" A middle-aged woman sporting a civil defense badge replied, "3 teams are stuck about 12 miles out, sir. The roads are completely blocked. We're trying to reach them with snow vehicles, but progress is slow." Michael felt another wave of frustration threaten to swallow him. How was it possible that with all his resources, his wealth and his influence, he could do nothing to save his own daughters? Then it happened. "Mr. Williams!" A communications technician shouted, his voice slicing through the room's chatter. "We just picked up a signal. It's faint, but it's definitely a distress call." In seconds, Michael was at the technician's side, eyes fixed on the screen showing the signal's waveform. Jack Anderson, 2 children, need help. Michael's heart leapt. His daughters were alive. "Trace that signal," he ordered. "Use every tool we have. Satellites, cell towers, anything." The room exploded with renewed activity. Engineers and technicians rushed about, calibrating equipment and cross-referencing data. But hope soon gave way to exasperation. The exact source of the signal remained elusive. The storm interfered with the equipment, making precise triangulation nearly impossible. "Best we can do is narrow it to a 6-mile radius, key, sir," one engineer reported, disappointment heavy in his voice. Michael felt the weight of failure threaten to crush him. 6 miles. Under normal conditions, that was nothing. But in this blizzard, it might as well be a journey to the moon. Frustrated, he turned away from the screens, pacing over to the window. Outside, the city he once ruled was unrecognizable. transformed into a barren white wasteland. His reflection in the glass startled him. Who was this man with haunted eyes and a tormented expression? Surely not the business titan, the tech visionary he imagined himself to be. Memories crashed over him. Emma at 3 begging him to read her a bedtime story. He'd promised tomorrow, caught up in a business call. Lily, taking her first steps while he was at a conference halfway around the world. How many tomorrows had he promised? How many precious moments had he missed? Always putting work first. Catherine's voice echoed in his memory. Michael, life won't wait. Our daughters are growing up. Don't miss it. He'd ignored her warnings, convinced he was building a legacy for his girls. But what good was an empire if he lost what truly mattered? Mr. Williams, Rachel, his assistant, intruded gently. The mayor's office is on the line. They're questioning the legality of some of our search methods. Michael felt a wave of anger boil up again. Bureaucracy. Always the damned bureaucracy. Tell them, he growled, to worry about legality after my daughters are safe. Rachel nodded but hesitated before leaving. Sir, if I may, maybe a more diplomatic approach. We need them on our side. Michael paused, surprised by the bold suggestion. In another life, he might have fired an employee for daring to question him. But now, he sighed, running a hand over his tired face. You're right, Rachel. Thank you. Please set up a video conference with them. We'll work it out together. As Rachel left to make the arrangements, Michael refocused on the screens. Jack's radio signal had become intermittent, each moment of silence torture. Hang on, girls, he muttered. Daddy's coming. The following hours were an emotional roller coaster. Small progress was quickly undone by fresh setbacks. It seemed nature itself was determined to thwart every effort. Late into the night, exhausted and desperate, Michael found himself alone in the command center. The screens flickered quietly, a constant reminder of the battle he was waging. His eyes fell on a photo of Emma and Lily, smiling on a sunny day at the park. Catherine had taken it just weeks before her diagnosis. Michael picked up the photo, gently tracing his daughters' faces. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry for not being there, for missing so much. But I promise, if I get a second chance, I'll make things right. In that moment, as if the universe answered his plea, one of the radios crackled to life. Base, this is Alpha Team. We believe we've located the signal's source. We're closing in now. Michael's heart soared. This was it. The moment that could change everything. Copy that, Alpha Team, he responded, his voice trembling slightly. Proceed with caution. And thank you. As the rescue team pushed forward through the storm, Michael Williams stood at the window, gazing outside. The first rays of dawn were beginning to pierce the clouds, as though nature itself was finally relenting. A new determination filled him. No matter what happened next, he would be a different man, a different father, the kind of person his daughters deserved. The storm might have devastated his city and shaken his world, but it had also given him something priceless: clarity. And with clarity came a silent promise to Emma and Lily. Their dad was coming home, in every sense of the word. The third day dawned with a deceptive stillness. Outside, the storm seemed to have lessened, but the penetrating cold remained a constant reminder of the danger lurking. Jack awoke with a knot in his stomach, not just from hunger, but from worry. Their supplies were nearly gone. As he tried to rekindle the dying fire, a low, pained sound caught his attention. It was Lily, curled beside Emma, her little body visibly trembling. Emma, Jack called softly. Is Lily all right? Emma, already awake and alert, looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. Mr. Jack, she's really warm. She won't stop shaking. Jack's heart sank. Carefully, he approached and touched Lily's forehead. It was burning hot. Damn, he muttered, trying to stay calm for Emma's sake. Looks like our little warrior has a fever. Will she be okay? Emma's voice trembled, betraying her fear. Jack forced a confident smile. Sure she will. We'll take care of her, right? We're a team, remember? Emma nodded resolutely, instantly slipping into the role of helper. Jack racked his brain, recalling his paramedic days. A fever in a young child could be dangerous, especially in these conditions. "Emma, I need you to be my special assistant again," Jack said, keeping his voice calm. "Can you grab some clean snow from outside?" While Emma headed off on her mission, Jack examined Lily more closely. Her breathing was a bit labored, and her cheeks were flushed. He swore under his breath, wishing he had a thermometer or any proper medical equipment. Emma returned quickly with a handful of clean snow. Jack praised her, then used a clean piece of cloth from the girl's backpack to create a cold compress. "This will help bring down her temperature," he explained to Emma, as he gently placed the compress on Lily's forehead. "We'll need to keep an eye on her and change it regularly." The hours that followed were a constant struggle. Jack and Emma took turns switching the compress, trying to coax Lily to sip small amounts of melted snow water. The younger girl alternated between restless sleep and soft whimpers, calling for her mother. "Mommy," Lily moaned at one point, eyes half open and unfocused. "I want Mommy." Emma, showing remarkable strength, held her sister's hand. "Mommy can't come right now, Lils, but I'm here, and Mr. Jack too. We'll take care of you." Jack felt a lump in his throat, once again awed by Emma's maturity and compassion. As the day wore on, a new problem arose. The makeshift heater Jack had rigged with the oil drum started to fail. The already intense cold became almost unbearable. Jack knew they needed heat, especially with Lily sick, but options were limited. Then his eyes fell on the radio. It was a wrenching decision. The radio was their communication lifeline, their best hope for rescue, but the batteries... "Emma," Jack called quietly, "I have to make a tough call. What do you think is more important right now? Trying to talk to people out there or keeping Lily warm?" Emma looked from her shivering sister to the radio, then back at Jack. Her eyes showed a comprehension far beyond her years. "We need to take care of Lily first, right?" Jack nodded, pride and sadness filling him at Emma's forced maturity. "Exactly. Sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect the ones we love." With a heavy sigh, Jack began dismantling the radio. Every piece he removed felt like it weighed a ton in his hands. But the sight of Lily's flushed face and trembling form reinforced his resolve. Using the radio's batteries and some wiring, Jack managed to cobble together a small electric heater. It wasn't much, but it made a noticeable difference in the temperature around Lily. "Mr. Jack," Emma asked after a while, her voice small and tentative, "what if—" "Nobody finds us now." Jack pulled Emma close, keeping one hand on Lily's forehead. "Emma, remember when we fixed that radio? It seemed impossible at first, but we didn't give up. That's how life goes. Sometimes it feels hopeless, but we have to keep going and believing." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, like being a guardian angel. "Exactly," Jack smiled, feeling a surge of affection for this extraordinary child. "And you've been the best guardian angel anyone could ask for." The hours crawled by. Jack and Emma kept their vigil, swapping out compresses and murmuring soothing words, fighting off exhaustion and fear. By evening, Jack noticed with relief that Lily's fever seemed to be subsiding. Her breathing was more regular, and the violent trembling had eased. "I think she's getting better," Jack whispered to Emma, who was struggling to keep her eyes open. "Really?" Emma asked, a tired but hopeful smile brightening her face. "Yes," Jack confirmed. "You've been amazing, Emma. Now get some rest. I'll keep an eye on Lily." Emma reluctantly snuggled up next to her sister, still holding Lily's hand as she drifted off. Jack watched the two of them, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had overcome yet another hurdle, but he knew their ordeal wasn't over. Supplies were practically gone, the cold was relentless, and now, without the radio, they were utterly isolated. Yet, looking at Emma and Lily, Jack felt his resolve renew. He would protect them no matter the cost. Somehow they would survive this ordeal. Outside, the storm finally seemed to be dying down. Jack had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, help was closer than they imagined. The specially equipped snow vehicles roared forward, their engines almost drowned out by the fierce wind. The rescue team, seasoned men and women experienced in extreme conditions, advanced slowly across the endless white. Each yard won was a victory over nature's fury. Back in the makeshift command center, Michael Williams paced anxiously, his eyes glued to the screens displaying the rescue team's painfully slow progress. Every minute felt like an eternity, the weight of guilt and fear threatening to overwhelm him. "Sir," one of the coordinators approached nervously, "the team is doing all they can, but the conditions—" Michael cut him off sharply. "I don't care. They need to go faster. My daughters are out there." Silence followed, broken only by the steady beeping of equipment. Michael scanned the exhausted yet worried faces of his team. He knew he was being irrational, that everyone was giving their all, but his helplessness was driving him mad. Then he made a decision. "Get a vehicle ready for me. I'm joining the search." The room exploded in protests. "Mr. Williams, it's too dangerous. We can't risk your safety too. Please reconsider." But Michael was resolute. "I've sat here long enough. Those are my daughters out there. I'm going." At the abandoned warehouse, tension was just as high. Jack stared at the last crumbs of food with thinly veiled despair. He had rationed to the extreme, but now there was nothing left. "Mr. Jack," Emma's weak voice interrupted his dark thoughts. "Lily's hungry." Jack forced a smile, hiding his own hunger and worry. "How about a story while we look for something to eat?" Emma nodded, though her eyes showed she understood more than she let on. Jack sat between the girls, pulling them close. The warmth of their small bodies was comforting in the warehouse's bitter chill. "Once upon a time," he began, voice calm despite the inner turmoil, "there was a tiny seed planted in the hardest, coldest soil you could imagine." As Jack spun his tale of perseverance and hope, he kept a close watch on the girls. Lily, still weak from the fever but clearly better, listened with wide eyes. Emma, though exhausted, never left her sister's side, constantly adjusting the makeshift blanket around them. And even when everyone thought it was impossible, the little seed kept growing, pushing through the frozen earth, reaching for the sun. Jack paused, overcome by a coughing fit he struggled to contain. The cold and hunger were taking their toll on him. "Mr. Jack?" Emma asked, voice laced with concern. "Are you okay?" Jack nodded, forcing another smile. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a bit tired. Now, where were we? Oh, right." He continued the story, determined to keep the girls' spirits up, even as his own hope wavered. With each word of courage and optimism, Jack tried to convince not only the girls but also himself that help was coming. Time crawled by. Jack alternated between storytelling, checking Lily's temperature, and tending to the waning fire with dwindling resources. Emma, showing surprising strength, never left her sister's side, helping Jack in every task, no matter how small. "Emma," Jack said gently during a quiet moment, "you've been amazing. Your sister is very lucky to have you." Emma offered a faint smile, her exhaustion evident. "Mommy always said we had to look out for each other, especially when things are hard." Jack felt a pang in his chest. The maturity and compassion of this child never ceased to amaze him. Your mother was a very wise woman. As evening descended, Jack could feel his own strength waning. The cold, hunger, and constant stress had worn him down, but looking at Emma and Lily, he found a reservoir of resolve he didn't know he had. "Okay, girls," he said, summoning the last of his energy, "how about one more story before bed? This time, about a brave knight and two fearless princesses who faced the coldest winter ever." While Jack spun his improvised tale, part of him prayed silently, prayed that rescue would come soon, that the girls would survive this ordeal, that he would have enough strength to protect them until then. Unknown to them, the rescue team pressed forward tirelessly through the blizzard, now led by a desperate father determined to find his daughters. The race against time continued, innocent lives hanging in the balance. The wind's howl subsided to a whisper, as though nature herself held her breath. Through the white horizon, a dark, imposing shape emerged. The abandoned warehouse. Michael Williams, his face etched with cold and determination, was the first to leap from the snow vehicle. His eyes, bloodshot from exhaustion and pent-up emotion, frantically scanned the structure for any sign of life. "Emma!" "Lily!" he shouted, his voice hoarse, echoing across the white expanse. The ensuing silence was deafening. For one dreadful moment, Michael's heart plummeted. What if they were too late? Then they heard it, a faint sound from inside the warehouse. Within seconds, the rescue team forced the rusted entrance. The interior was a place of stark contrasts. The cold was tangible, yet at the center, a small oasis of warmth clung stubbornly. And there, wrapped in improvised blankets, were Jack and the girls. "Daddy!" Emma's weak voice cut through the silence, her eyes wide with disbelief. Michael felt his knees buckle. In 2 strides, he was beside them, pulling Emma and Lily into a desperate embrace. "My girls," he sobbed, tears freezing on his cheeks. Thank God, thank God." Jack watched the reunion with a mix of relief and a pang of something else. Sadness. Loss. He wasn't sure. Emma broke the moment, her small hand still locked on Jack's. "Daddy, this is Mr. Jack. He's our guardian angel." Michael, still hugging his daughters, finally looked at Jack. The man before him looked like he had aged years in just a few days. His face was gaunt and pale, but his eyes, they shone with a mixture of exhaustion and fierce love for the girls. "Mr. Anderson," Michael began, his voice choked. I don't know how to thank you." Jack simply nodded, unable to speak. The cumulative stress of the past days, the rush of rescue, it all threatened to overwhelm him. The medical team rushed in, wrapping Jack and the girls in thermal blankets and preparing them for transport. Emma refused to let go of Jack's hand, her eyes pleading silently for him to stay. "It's okay, Emma," Jack whispered, his voice raspy. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The journey to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Michael never took his eyes off his daughters, afraid they might vanish if he blinked. Jack, for his part, fought exhaustion, determined to stay conscious until he knew the girls were safe. At the hospital, reality began to settle in. While doctors examined Emma and Lily, Michael and Jack found themselves alone in the waiting room, the silence between them heavy. Jack spoke first, his voice low and tired. "They're amazing girls, Mr. Williams, brave, strong." Michael nodded, a knot in his throat. "Because of you, Mr. Anderson, you saved them." Jack shook his head slowly. "No, Mr. Williams. They saved me." A doctor entered with reassuring news. The girls were dehydrated and mildly hypothermic, but they would make a full recovery, no permanent damage. With the girls stabilized and resting, Emma insisted on recounting the entire story. Her voice trembled with emotion as she described the crash, Jack's daring rescue, and their days in the warehouse. Jack told us stories to keep our spirits up," Emma explained, her eyes shining with admiration. "He shared his food with us, even when he was hungry. And when Lily got sick," her voice faltered. "He cared for her like she was his own daughter," Michael finished softly, the enormity of Jack's sacrifice hitting him hard. Jack, uncomfortable with the praise, changed the subject. "Mr. Williams, there's something you need to know." Then, in a calm but strained voice, Jack told Michael about Sarah, about her battle with cancer, about their struggles. He didn't specifically mention Central Hospital, but the pain in his voice was unmistakable. Michael listened in silence, feeling the weight of Jack's words. There was something there, a connection he couldn't fully grasp yet, but it made him feel inexplicably guilty. Emma, sensing the tension, squeezed Jack's hand. "Mr. Jack, don't be sad. Mom always said sometimes bad things happen so we can do good things afterward." The child's simple words struck both men. Jack finally let the tears he'd held back for so long fall. Michael, in turn, felt a resolution form in his heart. "Mr. Anderson." "Jack," Michael began, voice trembling slightly. "I can't imagine what you've been through, but I want you to know I'm forever grateful for what you did for my daughters. If there's anything at all I can do." Jack looked at Michael, seeing sincere regret in his eyes. For a moment, he considered telling him everything about Central Hospital, about how Michael's decisions had impacted his life. But looking at Emma and Lily, at the hope in their eyes, he decided that conversation could wait. "Just take good care of them," Jack finally said. "They're special." Michael nodded solemnly. "I promise, and Jack, you'll always be welcome in our lives. You're family now." Emma, overhearing, beamed. "See, Mr. Jack, I told you you were our guardian angel. Now you're our guardian angel forever." The girl's words brought tired but genuine smiles to both men's faces. Outside, the blizzard had finally ceased, giving way to the first rays of sunlight. It was as if nature itself was signaling the start of a new chapter, a journey just beginning. While the girls finally slept, safe at last, Jack and Michael remained at their bedside, silent protectors. Both knew there was much left unsaid, much to be resolved. But for now, they were united in gratitude and relief, an unexpected bond forged in the storm promising to reshape their lives in ways neither could predict. Days after the dramatic rescue, life in Millbrook began returning to normal. Snow melted gradually, revealing a town transformed not only by the storm but also by the extraordinary events that had transpired. Jack Anderson was back at his garage, trying to resume his routine, when he received an unexpected call. It was Michael Williams's personal assistant, inviting him to a meeting at the tech mogul's office. With a heavy heart and a swirl of conflicting emotions, Jack found himself standing before the towering skyscraper housing Williams Tech's headquarters. The contrast between his worn mechanic's coveralls and the luxurious surroundings couldn't have been starker. "Mr. Anderson," came Michael's voice the moment the elevator doors opened onto the top floor. "Please come in." The office was exactly as Jack had imagined, spacious, modern, with a panoramic view of the city. Michael looked different from the exhausted, emotionally raw man Jack had met at the hospital. He was back in his element, the powerful CEO. "Jack," Michael began, indicating a chair. "First, I want to thank you again. What you did for my daughters. There are no words." Jack nodded silently, uneasy with the gratitude. Michael continued, "I'd like to offer you a reward, something to express my gratitude." He slid an envelope across the desk. Jack didn't even glance at it. "Mr. Williams, thank you, but I can't accept. I didn't do it for money." "I understand," Michael replied, not looking surprised, "but there must be something I can do for you." "Anything." That was when Jack felt something inside him break. Years of pent-up pain, anger, and frustration rose to the surface. "There is something you can do, Mr. Williams," Jack said, his voice low but intense. "You can tell me why Central Hospital had to close, why so many lives had to be ruined for a business decision." Michael went visibly pale. You were a patient there." "My wife is Sarah," Jack answered, the anguish in his voice undeniable. "She was in the middle of treatment when the hospital shut down. We were told there would be transfers, continuity of care. But the reality was very different." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stood, walking to the window, his posture revealing the burden he now felt. "It was just business," he murmured, more to himself than to Jack. The numbers didn't add up. The board voted unanimously. "Business?" Jack interjected, his voice trembling. "Lives aren't business, Mr. Williams. Sarah wasn't the only one. Others too. Families destroyed. Dreams shattered." Michael turned to face him for the first time. I didn't know. They assured me every patient would be relocated, that no one would go without care." "Well, they were wrong," Jack replied simply. Silence hung thick between them, laden with unspoken emotions and painful truths. Finally, Michael broke it. "Jack, I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, voice heavy with regret. "Not just with the hospital, but with so many things in my life. I let numbers on a spreadsheet overshadow the real human cost of my decisions." Jack studied the man before him, seeing for the first time not a powerful CEO, but a human being wrestling with the weight of his choices. Michael went on, "In these past days since the rescue, I've done a lot of thinking about my priorities, about the legacy I want to leave behind. I've made a decision." He returned to his desk and opened a folder. "I was going to build a new business complex on the old Central Hospital site, but now," he revealed blueprints, "now I'm cancelling that plan. Instead, I intend to reopen Central Hospital." Jack's heart pounded. "Reopen?" Michael nodded, determination lighting his eyes. "Not just reopen it, but transform it. A state-of-the-art medical center with an accessible assistance program. A place where no one gets turned away because they can't pay." Jack was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the scale of what Michael was proposing. "There's more," Michael continued. I want you to lead that project, Jack." "Me?" Jack asked, stunned. "But I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about running a hospital." Michael smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "You're much more than that, Jack. You have compassion, integrity, and an understanding of people's real needs. That's exactly what this project requires." Jack hesitated, caught completely off guard. "It won't be easy," he warned. "There'll be resistance, red tape." "I know," Michael replied, "but together we can make the difference Sarah would have wanted. We can ensure what happened to her never happens again." The mention of Sarah's name hit Jack hard. He thought of her smile, her gentle strength even in the darkest days. What would she say if she were here now? "Why me?" Jack asked finally. "After everything, man, why trust me with this?" Michael rose and stood face to face with Jack. "Because you did what I should have done long ago. You put people first. You risked your life for my daughters, strangers to you, expecting nothing in return. That's the kind of leadership the new Central Hospital needs." Jack remained silent for a long moment, weighing the offer. He thought of Sarah, of how she had always pushed him to do more, to be more. He thought of Emma and Lily, and how their lives had become so entwined with his in the most unexpected way. And he thought of all the other Sarahs out there, people in need of hope. At last, Jack extended his hand. "For Sarah," he said, voice resolute. "For your daughters, and for every family that needs help. I accept." Michael shook his hand, the gesture sealing more than just a business deal. It was a promise, a commitment to do things differently. "It won't be easy," Michael cautioned. "We'll face skepticism, bureaucracy, maybe even active opposition. But I believe together we can make it happen." Jack nodded, feeling equal parts apprehension and determination. "One day at a time," he said. "That's how we survived the storm, isn't it?" Michael smiled, recalling Emma's words about their days in the warehouse. "One day at a time," he agreed. When Jack left the office that afternoon, he felt different. The weight of anger and grief he had carried for so long seemed lighter. In its place was a sense of purpose, a spark of hope he'd thought gone forever. Outside, the last remnants of the blizzard were fading, giving way to the first hints of spring. It was as if nature itself reflected the transformation happening inside both Jack and Michael. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, Jack Anderson looked toward the future, not with fear or resignation, but with hope. A hope born in the storm, forged through adversity, and now ready to bloom into something truly extraordinary. A year had passed since that fateful blizzard that changed so many lives in Millbrook Central Hospital, once a symbol of despair and abandonment, now stood majestic and renewed, its gleaming white walls shining in the spring sun. Jack Anderson walked the hospital corridors, greeting patients and staff with a warm smile. His ID badge read Director of Medical Assistance Program, a title that still surprised him sometimes. "Mr. Jack," called a child's voice. It was Matthew, an 8-year-old undergoing treatment for leukemia. "Look what I drew." Jack knelt down, admiring the colorful drawing of a superhero. "That's awesome, Matthew. Is that you after you get better?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. "And you're in it too, see? You're my helper." With a tightness in his throat, Jack hugged the child. Moments like this reminded him daily why he'd taken on this challenge. Across town, at Williams Tech headquarters, Michael Williams was wrapping up a crucial video conference. As soon as the call ended, he glanced at the clock, a smile lighting his face. It was time to pick up the girls from school. "Rachel," he called to his assistant, "cancel my afternoon appointments. I have an important date with 2 young ladies." Rachel smiled, well accustomed to her boss's new routine. "Of course, Mr. Williams. Enjoy your time with Emma and Lily." On the way to school, Michael reflected on how much his life had changed. The workaholic who'd once obsessed over profit was now a present father and a more conscientious leader. It hadn't been easy, but every one of his daughter's smiles reminded him he was on the right path. Outside the school, Emma, now 6, waited at the door, holding Lily's hand protectively. Lily was 4. "Daddy!" they shouted in unison, running into his arms. "My princesses," Michael said, enveloping them in a tight hug. "Ready for our special afternoon?" The girls nodded eagerly. It was the day of their weekly visit to Central Hospital, a tradition established in recent months. At the hospital, Jack greeted the Williams family with a broad smile. Emma ran up to him for a hug. "Mr. Jack, we brought new books to read to the kids." "That's wonderful, Emma," Jack replied, ruffling her hair affectionately. "They're going to love it." While the girls headed off to the pediatric ward with a nurse, Jack and Michael strolled down the corridors side by side. "How are things going here?" Michael asked. Jack sighed, a blend of fatigue and satisfaction in his voice, challenging but rewarding. "Every life we touch, every family we help, it makes it all worthwhile." Michael nodded, understanding. "I know exactly what you mean. Seeing the impact we're making, money can't buy that." They stopped in front of a large window overlooking a newly built hospital park. Children played there, recovering patients took their first post-surgery steps, and families found solace in the middle of difficult battles. "You know," Jack began, voice low and thoughtful, "there were times after losing Sarah that I thought I'd never find purpose again. And then that blizzard." Michael placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Sometimes life's storms blow us exactly where we need to be." Jack smiled, recalling the words he'd once told Emma during those warehouse days. "One day at a time, right?" "One day at a time," Michael echoed. The sound of children's laughter caught their attention. Emma and Lily had finished their visit and were now playing in the park, their cheerful voices piercing the mild spring air. "How about an impromptu picnic?" Michael suggested. "I'm sure we can convince the cafeteria to put something together." Minutes later, the four of them sat on a blanket under a large tree in the park. Emma excitedly recounted the stories she'd read to patients, while Lily played with a small teddy bear. A new version of Mr. Snuggles, a Christmas gift from Jack. Jack watched the girls, a serene smile on his face. It was amazing how two children he'd met under the most extreme circumstances had become such an integral part of his life. "They adore you, you know," Michael commented, following Jack's gaze. "Emma asks about you every single day." Jack felt a pang in his chest, a mix of joy and the faintest twinge of loss. "They're incredible. You're really lucky, Michael." "We're all lucky," Michael corrected gently. "You're part of this family now, Jack. I hope you know that." The words hit Jack deeply. Family. A word he never thought would apply to him again after losing Sarah. Emma, sensing the adults' serious conversation, decided to intervene. "Daddy, Mr. Jack, come play with us." The two men exchanged amused looks before getting up, ready for a round of tickles and laughter. As they played, Jack couldn't help reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The pain of loss, the fury of the storm, the fear and uncertainty, all had led to this moment of pure joy. Michael, for his part, watched his daughters interacting with Jack, feeling an overwhelming gratitude. This man, once just a statistic on a spreadsheet, had become a cornerstone in their lives. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, the four of them sat on the blanket, tired but content. "Mr. Jack," Lily asked, her voice growing sleepy, "are you going to stay with us forever?" Jack exchanged a glance with Michael before answering. "Well, Lily, I can't promise forever, but I can promise I'll be here whenever you need me." Emma, ever the protector, hugged her sister. "See, Lils, Mr. Jack is our guardian angel, remember? And guardian angels never go away." Michael felt tears prick at his eyes, moved by his daughter's innocent wisdom. "She's right, you know," he said to Jack. "You really are a guardian angel for all of us." Jack smiled, feeling a wave of emotion. "You're all my angels too. You brought me back to life when I thought there was no hope left." Exhausted from play, Emma and Lily soon fell asleep on the blanket, Emma protectively wrapping an arm around Lily. Jack and Michael remained awake, gazing at the emerging stars in the night sky. "If someone told me a year ago we'd be here today," Michael mused, "I would have called it impossible." Jack nodded. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But it's our choices that really matter. And the people we choose to have by our side," Michael added, looking at Jack meaningfully. The two men fell silent for a moment, each lost in his own thoughts. Central Hospital stood majestically in the background, a silent testament to the journey they had taken. "You know, Jack," Michael said at last, "I think I finally understand what it truly means to leave a legacy. It's not the buildings or the bank accounts. It's moments like this, the lives we touch, the changes we make in the world." Jack smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. "Sarah used to say something like that. She said our real wealth lies in the connections we form and the love we share." "Your Sarah was a wise woman," Michael said softly. "Yes, she was," Jack agreed, his heart filled with love and longing, but also a new sense of hope. As night fell over Millbrook, wrapping the park in a blanket of stars, Jack Anderson and Michael Williams sat side by side, silent guardians of two slumbering girls and a future brimming with promise. Once a symbol of loss and disappointment, Central Hospital now pulsed with life and hope, a beacon in the community. And there, in that perfect moment beneath the stars, two broken families joined together, forging a new story, one of redemption, purpose, and above all, love. A gentle breeze whispered through, carrying with it the promise of brighter days. And for the first time in a long while, both Jack and Michael felt they were exactly where they needed to be, ready to face whatever storms the future might bring, together.